Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the moment that almost nobody prepares you for. Not the breakup, not the nights you cried, not the first days of no contact when your hands shook and your heart screamed to reach out. There is a moment in your healing that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but energetically it changes everything. It's the moment when you are not just saying, "I'm done," with your mouth. You are done in your nervous system, in your habits, in your decisions, in the way you wake up and move through the day. You're not performing strength anymore. You've bled for it. You've sat through the loneliness, the cravings, the thousand urges to break no contact. And you've slowly discovered that you can still breathe, still live, still exist without reaching for them. That shift is quiet, but it is powerful. And whether you ever speak to them again or not, they feel it. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional pressure, but they are also hypersensitive to energetic loss. When you first pulled away, when you first said, "I'm done," part of them didn't believe it, because before, every time you pulled back, your energy stayed hooked on them. You still watched their stories, still checked their last scene, still answered if they reached out, still sent long texts when you couldn't hold your feelings in. Even in silence, you were energetically chasing. This time is different. This time you didn't just delete the chat. You started deleting the story you told yourself about them. You stopped explaining their behavior to your friends. You stopped defending them in your own mind. You stopped building fantasies about a future version of them who might one day get it. You began to anchor your days around things that had nothing to do with waiting, and slowly, the emotional oxygen you used to pump into that connection gets redirected back to yourself. That is the shift they feel, not because they're spiritual, not because they're psychic, but because the feedback loop they relied on suddenly weakens. Before, even when they were distant, there were always little signals that you were still emotionally available. A like here, a quick reply there, a birthday message, a "hope you're okay," a soft landing waiting for them, if they ever wanted to come back and rest their fear on your devotion. When you are truly done, those signals stop. They notice, sometimes consciously, sometimes in a vague discomfort they can't name. They notice that their birthday passed, and there was no message from you, not even a simple, "hope you're well." They notice that a song, a meme, a place that used to guarantee some kind of interaction from you now brings only silence. They notice that mutual friends mention your life, moving forward in ways that don't circle back to them. You're working on something, traveling, healing, laughing, living, and you're not transmitting any of it in their direction. Your absence stops being a tactic and becomes a reality, and that reality presses against the story they told themselves, that you would always be there, that no matter how far they pushed you, you would eventually bounce back. Avoidants are not blind to emotion, they just get overwhelmed by it. During the relationship, your intensity scared them, but it also reassured them. If you were that invested, they didn't have to be. Once you're truly done, the equation flips, and that terrifies them in a different way. They don't see you obsessing anymore. They don't feel you chasing. They don't sense that they can summon you with a breadcrumb. Even if you never post about them, even if you live quietly, the absence of that familiar energetic pull is loud. They might catch themselves thinking about you more, not less, precisely because they're no longer able to feed off the comfort of your constant availability. Before, they could think of you and soothe themselves with, "I could always go back." Now, when they think of you, they feel a chill, an awareness that if they knocked on your door, there's a real chance nobody would open it, or if someone did, it would be a different version of you entirely. What's important to understand is that this shift inside you doesn't require you to hate them, block them everywhere, or scream your boundaries from the rooftops. Often, it's marked by neutrality, not rage. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing them to see how much they hurt you. You stop arguing with their potential. You simply accept their reality and choose a different one for yourself. That acceptance, that withdrawal of emotional investment, that refusal to keep feeding a pattern that starved you, is exactly what they sense. The current between you goes from a strong, steady pull to a faint echo, And even if they pretend not to notice, their attachment system does. When you are truly done, your silence is no longer a test, it's a truth. And that truth is what triggers their next move. The thing you have to see clearly, without any fog, is this: when an avoidant feels you slipping out of their emotional grip, the move they make next is not about healing, it's about control. Their last dirty card isn't some holy moment of awakening. It's a survival strategy for their ego and their attachment system. Think about the timing. Where was all this passion, all this insight, all this? I finally get it. When you were sobbing on the bathroom floor because they wouldn't answer a simple question. Where was this intensity when you were begging for a real conversation, asking for basic effort, trying to build something stable? It didn't show up then because back then they still had what they wanted: you, on the hook, emotionally invested, always ready to try again. This last card appears only once there's something to lose. That alone tells you its purpose. Sometimes it arrives dressed as sudden cinematic love, out of nowhere. They send the paragraph you used to pray for at 3 a.m. I've thought about us every day. I realize now you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm ready to change. I can't live without you. They mention marriage, commitments, future plans, shared healing journeys. It feels like a dream come true, but look closely. Is there a consistent history backing those words, or just a sudden flood because they felt your energy go quiet? Is this transformation built on sustained action, or is it a Hail Mary thrown from the 11th hour because they can no longer feel you orbiting them? Love bombing is not real love. It's borrowed language aimed straight at your deepest hunger. It's saying everything you once begged to hear, not because they're finally ready to show up over time, but because those words are the fastest way to pull you back into the old cycle. If you take the bait, the pattern resumes temporary intensity, then slow withdrawal, then you chasing, then your peace evaporating all over again. Other times the last card doesn't come as romance. It comes as guilt so sharp it slices through your progress. Suddenly, they become the victim of the story. I can't believe you gave up on us like this after everything. You always said you'd never leave me. I guess you lied. Everyone leaves me in the end. Congratulations, you're just like the rest. They twist your healing into betrayal, your boundary into cruelty, your exhaustion into proof that you never really loved them. This is emotional blackmail dressed up as vulnerability. They are not opening their pain to take responsibility. They are weaponizing it to drag you back into the role you know too well: the fixer, the caretaker, the one who feels responsible for their feelings. If they can make you feel like the villain for finally choosing yourself, they know there's a chance you'll overcompensate. You'll stay too long. You'll let them back in just to prove you're not heartless. They're not trying to meet you in the middle. They're trying to yank you back to the old position, kneeling at the edge of their wounds, tending to them while yours bleed unattended. And when love and guilt don't hook you, they have one more version of that card: chaos. They provoke, they insult, they twist the knife. They say things designed to shatter your self-esteem or rewrite the narrative of what happened. No one will ever put up with you like I did. You're the reason this never worked. You're too much, too unstable, too crazy. You think you're better than me now. You're delusional. It hurts, of course it does. But underneath that cruelty is the same motive. Any intense emotion is connection. If they can't get you back through tenderness or remorse, they'll try to get you back through anger. If you start arguing, defending yourself, sending long messages trying to correct the story, they've succeeded. You're back in the dynamic, your nervous system reattached to their approval. The content doesn't matter as much as the effect. Are you emotionally spun up again? Are you thinking about them all day again? Are you pulled out of your center again? That's the win for them. So the pattern is always the same. They play the card that gives you strongest emotional hit based on what they know about you. If your deepest wound is never being chosen, they dangle, "You're my only one." If your deepest wound is being called selfish, they accuse you of abandoning them. If your deepest wound is being misunderstood, they say something so outrageously unfair you few have to explain yourself. This is why it feels so piercing, so urgent, so compelling. They're not speaking to the healed you. They're speaking to the injured version of you that used to run back every time. Their last dirty card is not a bridge into a new chapter. It's a hook trying to drag that old self out of the grave. When you see it clearly, you stop romanticizing it. You stop calling it fate or one last chance, and start seeing it as what it is, the nervous system of someone who never learned how to hold stable intimacy, panicking at the loss of its favorite regulator. You. It's not your job to regulate them anymore. The question every time is simple: does this message invite me into a genuinely healthier pattern, backed by real change, or does it just invite me back into being consumed? Once you know that their last dirty card is about pulling you back into the old cycle, not healing the relationship, it gets much easier to do the bravest thing of all. Feel the sting, feel the temptation, feel the old longing rise up, and still not go back. One of the hardest truths to swallow is that when an avoidant plays their last card, they don't throw it randomly. They throw it straight at the softest part of you. They don't necessarily do it with evil intent or a conscious plan, but they know you. They've watched you. They've seen you cry over being too much, heard you talk about not being chosen as a child, listened to stories of people walking away from you, felt how quickly you take responsibility when something goes wrong. All of that becomes a quiet map of where your deepest wounds live. And when they sense you pulling away for real, when they feel your energy unplugging from them, their nervous system reaches for the one strategy most likely to work: hit those wounds hard enough that you forget your new strength and return to your old role. If your deepest fear is being too much, their words will go right there. Suddenly, they're not just talking about the relationship, they're talking about your character. You're never satisfied. You always need so much from people. This is why things never work for you. You're exhausting. Those phrases are not feedback, they are weapons. They are designed to crack the identity you've been trying to build. The one that says, my needs are valid, my feelings are allowed. If they can get you back into the old belief, I am too much, I'm lucky anyone loves me at all, then you're more likely to abandon your boundary in return, just to prove you're not the problem. If your deepest wound is abandonment, they will threaten your sense of being a good, loyal person. You just walk away when things get hard. You're like everyone else. You gave up on me. I trusted you not to leave, and you did anyway. Those words twist the knife in that part of you that swore, I'll never be like the people who hurt me. Suddenly you feel like the villain in their story. And for someone whose identity is built on being the giver, the fixer, the one who stays, that is agonizing. Their last card uses that pain to pull you back into overcompensating, staying in something that's breaking you just so you don't have to feel like you're breaking them. If your deepest wound is not feeling enough, they will switch between idealizing and devaluing you so fast your head spins. 1 minute, no one will ever compare to you. You're everything I want. The next, you think you're special. You're not that great, you know. That push-pull hits the part of you that has always hustled for worthiness. When they put you on a pedestal, you feel seen. When they knock you off it, you feel desperate to climb back up. The last dirty about honest evaluation of who you are. It's about keeping you busy trying to prove your value, so you don't notice how little they're actually giving. If your deepest wound is being misunderstood, they will rewrite the history of the relationship in a way that feels so unfair you feel compelled to fight it. You were abusive. You never tried. You didn't support me. Hearing that when you know how much you bent, sacrificed, and swallowed can be enraging. They are counting on that. Because if they can drag you into a debate about the past, about who did what and why, they have you emotionally engaged again. Now you're sending long messages, defending yourself, rehashing moments, trying to be seen accurately. Once again, your energy is wrapped around them instead of around your own healing. All of this works because wounds existed long before they did. They did not create your fear of being too much, too little, too hard to love. They found those fears already inside you and, over time, learned how to press them. When you were in love, that knowledge sometimes came out as comfort and reassurance. I'll never leave you. You're not too much for me. Now, when they're losing control, that same knowledge gets flipped and used to destabilize you. You left me. You are too much. You'll never find anyone else who puts up with you. The intimacy you offered, a front row seat to your heart, becomes a playbook for their last attempt to pull you back. The key is not to hate yourself for how deeply this affects you, but to recognize what is actually happening. When their words land like an earthquake inside you, it's not because they're telling the truth. It's because they've hit an old fracture line. Your job is not to argue with them at that fracture. Your job is to tend to it. Instead of, how could you say that about me? Turn inward and ask, why does this hurt so much? What story about myself is this lighting up? Maybe it's, I'm only lovable if I stay, or I'm selfish if I protect myself, or I'm broken and no one else will want me. Once you see the story, you can choose not to let their last card write the ending. As painful as it is, their targeting of your deepest wounds can become information. It shows you where healing is needed. It shows you what beliefs make you easiest to hook. It shows you which version of you is most vulnerable to going back. And when you start doing the work to repair those places, not for them, but for you, their words start to lose their grip. The last dirty card only has power if it can drag you back into an old lie about yourself. The more you learn to anchor into the truth, that your needs are not too much, your boundaries are not cruelty, your leaving is not betrayal when staying means abandoning yourself, the less those targeted hits knock you off your feet. They may still sting, but they no longer decide your next move. One of the clearest signs that you've grown is this: you stop getting hypnotized by intensity and you start looking for consistency. At the beginning of your journey with them, intensity was everything. The butterflies, the deep late night talks. I've never felt this with anyone. Moments, the arguments followed by passionate makeups. The way they could say one perfect sentence and temporarily erase weeks of distance. Your nervous system got wired to believe that big emotional waves meant big love. So when they finally show up with tears, long paragraphs, grand declarations, or dramatic regret just as you're walking away, a part of you still lights up and whispers, "This is it. This is what I've been waiting for." And that is exactly why that moment is so dangerous. Real healing, real change, real growth in a person, especially in someone with avoidant tendencies, does not arrive as a sudden emotional thunderstorm the second they feel you slipping away. That storm might be real in the sense that they are genuinely distressed, genuinely afraid of losing you, genuinely feeling things they've been pushing down. But emotion is not the same as transformation. Intensity is not the same as stability. A trembling voice saying, "I can't lose you," is not the same as a grounded heart saying, "I will show up differently every day, whether you are running toward me or not." If they truly wanted healing, you wouldn't only see effort when you're halfway out the door. You would have seen it when you were sitting on the edge of the bed saying, "I'm not okay." You would have seen it when you asked, calmly and clearly, "Can we please talk about this?" You would have seen it when you cried and told them, "I feel alone in this relationship." Instead, what you saw over and over was dismissal, shutdown, minimization, deflection. They changed the subject. They told you that you were overreacting. They said, "This is just how I am," and expected you to adjust. That was their real pattern. The last-minute surge of emotion when you're leaving doesn't erase the hundreds of small moments where they chose distance over repair. Humility is the first ingredient of real change, and humility doesn't sound like, "You're abandoning me just like everyone else," or "You're throwing away something amazing." Humility sounds like, "I see now how much I hurt you. I didn't listen when you tried to tell me. I thought my discomfort mattered more than your pain. That was unfair." Accountability means they talk about their own behavior without turning the spotlight back on you. "I ignored your messages. I shut down instead of sharing what I felt. I made you feel crave for sensing the distance that was actually there." These are sentences that cost the ego something. They admit out loud that the problem was not just your reaction, but their action. Then comes behavior over time, and this is where most last dirty cards fail. Anyone can send a long message once. Anyone can cry once. Anyone can be attentive for a week when they're terrified of losing their emotional safety net. But can they keep answering the phone when the relationship is boring, not dramatic? Can they stay in the room when conflict arises instead of disappearing for days? Can they validate your feelings without making it about how guilty or overwhelmed they are? Can they go to therapy, read the book, do the work, not as a performance for you, but because they are genuinely tired of their own patterns? Real change is not glamorous. It's 1,000 small, unsexy choices that you can only measure over weeks and months, not in one desperate night. Ask yourself honestly, do they show up with effort when there is nothing to gain in that moment, or only when there is something to lose? Do they apologize spontaneously, or only when you're pulling away? Do they initiate hard conversations, or only respond when you corner them with, "We need to talk"? Someone who truly wants healing doesn't wait until you've packed your emotional bags to learn how to speak your language. They may still be scared, still imperfect, still struggling, but you will see initiative, not just reaction. You will see them taking responsibility before you threaten to leave, not only after. The last dirty card relies on your old belief that strong emotion equals strong commitment. But you're learning that the people who are safest for your heart are not the ones who shout the loudest when you leave. They're the ones who quietly, consistently show up while you're still there. You don't need another promise made in panic. You need patterns that hold, even when you're not on the verge of walking away. When you understand this, those last-minute surges stop looking like miracles and start looking like what they really are: fear trying to dress itself up as love. The brutal reason their last dirty card ever worked on you in the past is because a part of you believed that being chosen by them would finally prove you were enough. That's the truth most people don't want to say out loud. You weren't just fighting for a relationship. You were fighting for an identity. Every time they pulled away and then came back, every time they gave you crumbs and then a sudden rush of attention, it hit that core wound in you that whispered, "If I can just get this person, the one who keeps rejecting and resisting me, to fully choose me, then I will finally feel worthy, finally feel special, finally feel safe." That is why a single text could erase months of pain. That is why one apology could override 1,000 red flags. It wasn't just about them. It was about what their validation meant to the part of you that has always felt like it had to earn love. When they played their last card, it was aimed straight at that wound. "You're the only one who ever understood me. I can't live without you." You're walking away from the best thing you ever had. Whether it was sugar or poison, the message underneath was the same: you are responsible for my emotional world, and your worth is tied to staying here and saving me. If you still believed, even a little bit, that your value came from being needed, from being the one who stays no matter what, from being the one they finally wake up for, then that card had power. You would think, "They're finally choosing me," and ignore the fact that this outburst only arrived when you were walking out the door. You were starving, so even manipulation tasted like love. But something changes the day you stop treating their choice as your mirror. Healing starts the moment you decide to measure your worth by your own standards, not by how quickly someone who fears intimacy decides to cling to you when you leave. You start looking at the full picture instead of the highlight reel. You remember the ignored messages, the minimized feelings, the way you begged for basic communication. You stop saying, "They love me deep down," and start asking, "How do they show up on the surface where it actually counts?" Slowly, your self-respect begins to outweigh your longing. You begin to realize that you can be a good, loving, loyal person and still say no more to a connection that is killing you. Reclaiming self-respect doesn't mean you become cold or heartless. It means you draw a clear line between your capacity to love and your willingness to suffer. You start honoring your boundaries with the same devotion you once gave to understanding theirs. You stop chasing people who confuse you. You stop tolerating cycles that keep you small. You stop breaking your own heart just to keep someone else comfortable. And as you do that, the part of you that once believed, if they choose me, I will finally be enough, slowly transforms into, I am enough whether they choose me or not. That shift is quiet, but it's seismic. It changes how their words land in your body. When they play their last card now, you don't just hear the content, you see the pattern. You notice the timing, the urgency, the sudden depth that was missing when you were actually in the trenches asking for help. Instead of thinking, wow, they really love me, you find yourself thinking, wow, they really hate losing control. Instead of asking, what do I need to do to prove I'm not abandoning them? You ask, what would I be abandoning in myself if I went back into this? Their praise doesn't inflate you the way it used to, because you've stopped letting them be the judge of your value. Their insults don't define you the way they once did, because you've stopped believing that anyone who can't cherish you gets to tell you who you are. Building peace without them is what really breaks the spell. The first few days or weeks without their chaos feel empty, flat wrong. Your nervous system misses the drama. But as time passes, you start to notice the benefits of not living on an emotional roller coaster. You sleep deeper. You laugh a little more easily. Your friendships feel safer. You're not constantly bracing for the next withdrawal, the next shutdown, the next mixed signal. Your body starts to associate peace with safety instead of boredom. That means when their last dirty card arrives, it doesn't feel like oxygen anymore. It feels like a threat to the calm you worked so hard to build. So the very thing that used to hook you, high intensity, big promises, wild guilt trips, now becomes your red flag. Where you once heard, I choose you, you now hear, I choose to repeat the same cycle. Where you once felt flattered to be so central to their emotional storm, you now feel wary because you know what it costs you to become someone's emotional regulator. The last card only works on the version of you who is still waiting to be chosen to feel worthy. On the version of you who knows their worth, it just looks like what it is, a desperate attempt to pull you back into a story you've finally outgrown. You can still feel the sting, you can still feel the pull, you can even still love them from a distance. But you don't go back because you've finally realized the most powerful choice of all is not getting them to pick you. It's choosing yourself. Real power is not loud. It doesn't always look like blocking, screaming, posting quotes, or giving a final speech that destroys them. Real power is often quiet, almost boring from the outside. It's when you feel the familiar pull, the familiar ache, the familiar urge to respond to that text, to answer that call, to reopen that chapter. And you simply don't. Not from hatred, not from revenge, but from a deep, grounded knowing that you cannot afford to lose yourself again. You've already paid that price once with your sleep, your mental health, your self-esteem, your peace. Real power is not picking up the pen to rewrite the same story for the 100th time, just because the main character finally remembered your name. Think about how much of your life was spent inside that game, even if you didn't call it that. They pulled away, you leaned in. They went silent, you over-explained. They were vague, you became a detective. They were cold, you turned yourself into a furnace. Every move they made required a response from you, and you played your part faithfully because you believed that one day, if you just played it right, the outcome would be different. You attacked yourself for not being enough. You explained yourself endlessly to them. You tried to prove you were worthy by giving more, swallowing more, forgiving more. But none of that changed the rules of the game. It only exhausted you while they kept their distance and their power. Not entering the game means you finally understand something crucial. The only winning move is to step off the board altogether. It means you let them have their version of the story without chasing them down to correct it. You stop trying to make them see how much they hurt you in order to validate your pain. Your pain is already valid. You lived it. You stop trying to make them understand your heart so that your love can feel real to them. Your love was already real. You stop trying to get them to admit what they did so that you can finally believe yourself. You already know what happened. You don't need a sign from the person who wounded you to trust your own experience. Protecting a healed version of you is an active choice. This version of you is not untouched. They were built out of the bruised, broken, exhausted parts you nearly lost in that connection. They are the one who learned to sit with the urge to text and chose to breathe instead. They are the one who finally admitted, "I am not okay here," and walked away, even while their hearts still loved. They are the one who had the courage to stop performing, chill, and start honoring their needs. That part of you is precious. When the avoidant plays their last card, they are not speaking to this healed you. They're speaking to the old you. The one who would have thrown herself back into the fire just to feel chosen for a moment. Your job now is to stand between them and that old version and say, "No, we are not doing that again." Choosing yourself over the cycle doesn't mean rewriting history. You don't have to pretend you never loved them. You don't have to deny the good moments. You don't have to demonize them to justify leaving. You can say, "I loved you," and still refuse to re-enter something that dismantles you. You can hold both truths at once, that there were beautiful parts and that it still wasn't healthy for you. Loving them in the past simply means honoring that your feelings were real, that your devotion was sincere, that your efforts were genuine. It does not mean you owe them another round. It doesn't mean you keep sacrificing your future to prove your love for a past that already proved itself. Refusing to betray yourself in the present looks like very simple, very powerful actions. You leave that message on read. You answer in 2 calm sentences instead of an essay. You say, "I wish you well," and you mean it. But you don't add, "Let's try again." You sit with the discomfort of not rescuing them from their own consequences. You let their feelings be theirs without rushing in as the paramedic of their emotional emergencies. You don't stalk their reaction to see if you've won. You don't use your healing as a new performance to impress them. You turn your attention back to your own growth, your own body, your own relationships, your own life. And here is the quiet magic over time. Not re-entering the game stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like freedom. The old rush, the old drama, the old high of being pulled back and begins to look small compared to the steady satisfaction of waking up without dread, of going to sleep without chaos, of moving through your day without waiting for someone emotionally unavailable to decide whether you're worthy of peace. You realize that the power you were always trying to get from them, the power of being chosen, seen, fought for, was actually something you could only ever give to yourself. And the moment you choose not to go back, not because you don't care, but because you finally do care about you, that's the moment you stop being a character in their story and become the author of your own.